He wouldn't stop saying MIT. At the rooftop gala above the Boston Harbor, Daniel Brooks floated from guest to guest with his arm hooked around his fiancée's waist, introducing her the same way each time. "This is Evelyn, PhD in robotics, from MIT. He watched the flicker of envy in people's eyes like it was oxygen. Somewhere between the champagne and the speeches, he almost forgot there was a time he'd introduced another woman as his wife, Maya, who'd worked double shifts so he could chase his dreams. Then the crowd went quiet. A midnight black Rolls-Royce pulled up, and Maya stepped out. On the elevator ride up to the seaport rooftop, Daniel checked his reflection for the 5th time. The mirrored walls threw back a man in a tailored navy suit, hair swept carefully aside, jaw tense in a way that looked like determination if you didn't know him very well. Beside him, Evelyn scrolled through her phone, blue light reflecting off the thin silver frames of her glasses. She wore a simple black dress that somehow made her look even more brilliant, like all the unnecessary details had been stripped away. "You remember the Davises?" Daniel asked, adjusting his cufflinks. Venture capital, right? You showed me their LinkedIn profiles at 1 a.m., she said without looking up. "That's them. He's obsessed with Ivy League pedigrees. Just mention your work with the Media Lab if it comes up." She finally looked up, amused. "You mean if you bring it up?" Daniel flashed a quick smile. "It's a big night. I just want people to understand how exceptional you are." What he didn't say was how exceptional we are. He'd spent years feeling like he was one elevator ride away from being found out, that the right question from the right person would reveal that his MBA was from a decent but not top-tier school, that his childhood was more grocery coupons than country clubs, that he'd learned which forks to use from YouTube. But Evelyn was pure social currency. MIT, robotics, papers cited by people who wore cardigans and talked about Nobel nominees like neighbors. He'd once thought he'd feel this secure with a ring on another woman's hand. The elevator chimed, doors sliding open onto warm light and the soft hum of strings. A wall of glass showed the harbor below, dotted with boats like scattered teeth. "Ready?" he asked. "I'm here, aren't I?" Evelyn slipped her phone away. He placed a hand on the small of her back and guided her into the gleaming room as though he owned it. Within minutes, he found his rhythm. "This is Evelyn Park," Daniel said to a cluster of grey-haired men near the bar. "PhD candidate in robotics, MIT." Brows lifted, glasses paused mid-sip. "Oh, MIT, wonderful," said one of them. "What's your area?" "Human-robot collaboration in high-risk environments," Evelyn said, her voice modest but assured. "Specifically real-time decision systems." Daniel watched the way their attention shifted to her, radiant and hungry. Pride flared in his chest like a match. Their respect for her felt like respect for him, extended by proximity. He knew the exact moment he started relying on that feeling like a drug. It wasn't tonight. It was years ago in a cramped apartment in Somerville when his first boss had made a joke about state school kids getting lucky in front of the whole team and everyone had laughed. Even Maya had smiled thinly, eyes dropping. He'd laughed too, loud enough to prove it didn't sting. Tonight, no one joked. No one laughed at him. People leaned in. They asked Evelyn questions. They asked him how he'd landed someone like her, and he laughed, pretended he didn't drink that phrase like champagne. The music swelled. A server passed with a tray of oysters. Someone mentioned an upcoming panel at MIT he should definitely attend. This was the life he believed he'd been heading toward for years. Prestige, polished glass, people nodding when he spoke. No one needed to know that once he'd worked the loading dock at a grocery store, trudging home to a small apartment where his wife sat at the kitchen table with unpaid bills. He shook the memory off like rain. That had been another life, another marriage. He'd paid his dues. He deserved this. So when the crowd near the balcony suddenly fell silent and heads turned toward the elevator, Daniel barely noticed. He was too busy saying she actually turned down an offer from Stanford to stay at MIT. Then he felt, rather than heard, the shift in the room, a hush that tasted like curiosity. He followed their gaze. Down below, at the private entrance, a black Rolls-Royce Ghost slid to the curb like a shadow given shape. The valet hurried forward. The driver stepped out, his suit subtly more expensive than Daniel's. He circled to the passenger side and opened the door. A slender leg appeared first, in a dark green dress. Then a woman stepped out, her hair swept up, the city lights threading through it like silver. For half a second, he saw only her profile. The curve of her cheek, the familiar tilt of her chin when she spoke. No, the breath left his lungs. The years she'd been gone collapsed between heartbeats. Maya. 3 years earlier, Maya Alvarez Brooks had stood in a very different doorway. Not a rooftop gala, but a beige mediation room in a low-rise near Government Center, its fluorescent lights buzzing like mosquitoes. A pot of coffee cooled on a side table. The carpet was dotted with stains that could have been from dropped pens or spilled lives. Across from her, Daniel sat in a charcoal suit she'd once helped pick out. He scrolled through his phone until the mediator cleared her throat. "We're here to finalize the terms of the divorce," the mediator said. "I understand you've agreed that Daniel will keep the condo and the car, and Maya will take the savings," Daniel said quickly. "What's left of it?" Maya's hands twisted in her lap. Savings. The word sounded generous until you looked at the numbers. After his MBA loans, the credit cards, the move, the furniture he swore he needed for clients. They can tell if it's from IKEA, Maya. There wasn't much. She'd known how little there was before she signed. She'd done the budget late at night, the way she'd done everything in their marriage, quietly, competently in the background. First, there had been love. That came easy. He'd been funny then, broke, earnest, with a chipped-tooth smile and a way of looking at her like she was the only person in the room who mattered. They met on the Red Line of all places. She'd spilled coffee on her blouse. He'd handed her a napkin and made some joke about starting the day caffeinated and chaotic. He told her stories about growing up in a town where nobody left and how he planned to. She told him about community college and working nights at a diner to help her mother. He never mocked her diploma. Not at first. Back then he'd said things like, "You're the smartest person I know, degree or no degree," while she edited his grad school essays until dawn. She still remembered the acceptance letter. "We are pleased to offer you admission." He'd lifted her off the ground in their sagging kitchen, laughing. "We did it," he said, not noticing the pronoun until much later when "we" turned to "I." When they moved for his program, Maya picked up extra shifts as a data entry temp, then as a junior analyst. She learned Excel the way other people learned languages, watching tutorials on her lunch breaks. Their fights started small. "Can you just not bring up your job when my classmates are around?" he'd said once, not meeting her eyes. "You know how they are about non-traditional backgrounds." "What does that even mean, Daniel?" "It means they assume you're dumb if you didn't go to an Ivy. I'm just trying to protect you." She'd accepted that the way she'd accepted working late, accepted skipping vacations, accepted holding her breath when he came home in a mood. Protection, she'd thought then, felt a lot like erasure. By the time he finished the MBA, the man who'd once confessed his fears to her came home with a different vocabulary. Brand. Positioning. Perception. Somewhere in there he'd started perceiving her as a liability. It was subtle at first. Jokes about her little analyst job at a mid-size firm. Comments about how, in certain circles, credentials matter. She noticed that when he introduced her at events, he said, "This is Maya," and nothing else. No last name. No mention of how she'd found a way to automate half her team's reporting process. At one particularly glossy fundraiser, she'd overheard him say, "She's between things right now. But it's great. It lets me really focus on my career. Between things, she'd been working 60-hour weeks while he took networking lunches. The first real fracture came when she found the messages. A work friend from his firm. Late-night texts filled with emojis that weren't strictly professional. Complaints about how Maya just doesn't get this world. When she confronted him, his face hardened into a stranger's. "Do you have any idea how much pressure I'm under?" he snapped. "Everyone at the firm is from somewhere you've probably only seen in movies. Their dads own things, Maya. I'm the charity case. If I don't fit in, I lose everything I've worked for. I can't carry you and my career." "Carry me," she repeated. "Who worked double shifts while you were in school? Who covered your student loan payment last month?" "That's not the same thing." "What is it then?" "It's money," he said. "That's transactional. This is about perception." Word by shriveling word, she felt the life they'd built crumble. The affair was emotional, he swore. Then it was just a mistake. Then not the point. The point, he insisted, was that he needed someone who understood ambition. Maya signed the papers 2 months later. "I just want you to be happy," she'd said, and some naive part of her had meant it. She was so used to folding herself into shapes that fit his needs that leaving still felt like accommodation. When she walked out of that mediation room, the December air slapped her cheeks raw. She didn't have a car anymore. He'd kept that. The tea station was 3 blocks away. She pulled her thrift store coat tighter and walked into the wind, carrying a manila envelope full of legal confirmation that their life together had ended. She thought irrationally about the coffee he'd handed her on the Red Line years ago, about how kindness could be the first note in a song that ended in dissonance. As she descended the station stairs, a luxury car rolled past above, sleek, dark, indifferent. Maya didn't see it. 3 years later, she would step out of a car like that and feel every step like a reclamation. By the time Leon Hartman saw her, Maya had already been passed over twice, not for promotions, for cabs. It was raining, one of those sideways Boston rains that turned umbrellas into kites. Maya stood near a bus stop in Kendall Square, soaked to the knees, clutching a cardboard tube full of grant proposals against her chest. Her job at the non-profit think tank didn't pay enough for Ubers on a regular basis. Buses she could justify. Taxis were a luxury reserved for sprained ankles and food poisoning. Tonight, she was dangerously close to making an exception. She'd just left a meeting with a potential funder that had gone, all right. Not great, not terrible. The man had smiled politely and said, "We'll keep your proposal in mind." She knew what that meant. She also knew the work her team was doing, building data tools for small community health clinics, could change lives. She just didn't have the vocabulary of status to make the right people believe that. An empty taxi slowed, blinked, then sped up as a man in a nicer coat stepped off the curb 15 feet ahead and raised his hand. Maya watched it glide past her, as unobtainable as a private jet. She sighed, shifting her weight. Her phone buzzed. A text from her director. "Any luck?" She typed back, "He said he'll think about it, so maybe." She didn't add. "He asked if we had any celebrity collaborators. Didn't seem interested in our pilot data." Across the street, a black Rolls-Royce Ghost was double parked, its driver scrolling through his phone. From the back seat, Leon watched Maya through rain-blurred glass. He'd just left a meeting that was the mirror image of hers, a private dinner with investors who'd begged him to lead another fintech round. He'd declined, politely, firmly. He was tired of multiplying numbers that already belonged to the rich. Hartman Capital had made him a billionaire before he turned 40. That had been almost a decade ago. In the years since, he'd gone from hungry to hollow. He'd started the Hartman Foundation to fill that hollowness with something that mattered. Housing projects, public health, education initiatives, anything that felt like atonement for the years he'd spent turning people's addictions to fast trading into his own profit. The problem was, even in philanthropy, people lied. They lied with glossy decks and staged photos of smiling children. They lied by omission, dressing up vanity projects as impact. So he'd developed a habit, watching people before he spoke to them. You could learn a lot from how someone treated a stranger, or how they reacted when things didn't go their way. He watched Maya watch the taxi drive by, her shoulders sagging for a moment before she squared them. She checked the bus schedule on her phone. The next bus was 19 minutes away. The rain intensified. She didn't move. "Who waits 19 minutes in this weather?" he murmured. "Someone who can't afford not to," his driver said without looking up. Leon made a decision before he'd fully articulated it. He opened his door and stepped out into the rain. Maya looked up as a tall man in a dark overcoat approached, his hair plastered slightly to his forehead. "Excuse me," he said, keeping a polite distance. "You just came from the Rosenfeld building, right? The Global Health Fund?" "That's specific," she said, startled. "Yes?" He nodded at the cardboard tube in her arms. "Grant proposal?" She hesitated. "I don't usually discuss work with strangers at bus stops." "Fair," he said, a ghost of a smile. "I'm Leon Hartman." Recognition flickered across her face, not the full-body jolt some people gave him, but something more measured. "The Hartman Foundation," she said. "Among other sins." She huffed a small laugh despite herself. "You were meeting with Rosenfeld?" he asked. "Yes, we're a small think tank, data tools for community clinics. It's not very sexy." "Saving lives with better data is plenty sexy," he said. "Did he bite?" "We'll keep you in mind." Ouch. "Yeah." She shifted her weight again. "It's fine. I'm used to it." He studied her for a moment. The way she didn't apologize for taking up space. The mixture of exhaustion and stubbornness. "What's your name?" he asked. "Maya." "Alvarez. Do you have a deck?" She blinked. "On my laptop." "Come show me," he said. "I have a car. It's warmer than this bus stop." "Look, I appreciate the offer, but—" he gestured toward the rolls. "I'm not trying to kidnap you. I'm trying to decide if my foundation should fund you." The rain drummed on the sidewalk between them. In another life, she might have refused out of principle. In this one, she'd learned that principals didn't pay for servers or staff. 10 minutes, she said. "And if you say anything creepy, I'm leaving." "I prefer my philanthropy non-creepy," he said dryly. In the back seat, she opened her laptop and launched into the same presentation she'd given Rosenfeld, but something shifted as she spoke. Maybe it was the way Leon asked questions that were about the work, not the optics. Maybe it was the way he listened without checking his phone. "You built this interface yourself?" he asked, scrolling through a demo. "Mostly," she said. "Our dev contractor did the heavy lifting, but the workflow is mine." "And you got 3 clinics to adopt it?" "Pilot program. Wait list of 7 more if we can get the funding." He nodded slowly, eyes distant for a moment, thumb tapping against his knee. "Your director, is he the one who pitched?" "I did," she said. "He came, but I did the talking." "Of course you did," Leon murmured. He closed the laptop carefully and looked at her. "How much do you need for a year?" she told him, hands trembling slightly. "That's it," he said, her mouth twisted. "To you maybe that's it. To us, it's everything." He considered that. "I'll fund you for 2. She blinked. What?" 2 years, full amount plus a buffer, on one condition. Here it comes, she thought. The branding demands, the photo ops, the strings. "You stop acting like you're asking for favors," he said. "You're not. You're offering people a chance to do something that matters." The words hit a place inside her she hadn't realized was bruised. She swallowed. "That's not usually how it feels." "I've seen the other side," he said. "Trust me, your way has more integrity." She didn't cry, not in front of him. not with rain still drying on her cheeks. 2 weeks later, the grant agreement was signed. 3 months after that, he asked if she'd consider coming on as Director of Data Initiatives at the Hartman Foundation. "I need someone who understands numbers and neighborhoods," he said. "Most people have one or the other." She hesitated. Her current team needed her. But Leon offered a chance not just to survive in the non-profit world, but to shape it. She took the job. Somewhere along the way, Director of Data Initiatives became Chief Operating Officer of Hartman Impact Labs, a new venture spinning out of the foundation to invest in community-driven tech. Leon made her a co-founder. He gave her equity. He listened when she said things needed to be done differently. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were grueling weeks, failed pilots, board fights. She still rode the bus more often than not. But there was a new steadiness under her feet. She was no longer the woman in the background. She was the one in the room. So when Leon forwarded the invitation to the Seaport Gala, she almost declined. The host was an old acquaintance of his, raising money for a social impact innovation hub that sounded suspiciously like a co-working space with plants. "Take the night," he'd said, leaning against her office doorway. "Eat their lobster. Let them pitch you instead of the other way around for once." She'd smiled. "You just don't want to make small talk." "That too," he paused. "Come with me. As Hartman Impact Labs co-founder, people should get used to seeing you arrive in style." "Style is a strong word for me, tripping in heels," she said. "Style," he repeated firmly. "We'll send the car." She'd said yes, eventually. It would be good for the labs, for their presence. She knew in a distant, abstract way that Daniel moved in some of the same circles now. Finance, philanthropy, tech, they all bled into each other. But Boston was a city of silos. She'd made it 3 years without crossing his path. She told herself that if she did see him, if, by some cosmic coincidence, he was there, she would be fine. She was not that woman in the mediation room anymore. She believed that. Almost. The invitation sat on Leon's conference table, thick cream cardstock with embossed gold letters. Seaport Future Impact Gala underneath, in smaller font, honoring leaders in innovation, finance, and philanthropy. Maya flipped it over, then back again. "Do they pay by the word?" Leon chuckled. "They pay with naming rights and truffle mac and cheese." "So, a fair trade," she said. "Come," he urged. "Wear something that makes our board wonder why they ever underestimated you." She rolled her eyes. "Our board doesn't underestimate me. They underestimate women named Alvarez from East Boston. Entirely different thing." "Then give them a new archetype," he said. She traced the edge of the invitation. "Are you sure you don't want to bring someone else? This is the kind of event where people assume things when a man like you shows up with a woman like me." "A competent partner?" he asked. "A younger woman," she said dryly. "You know how it looks." "I'm not interested in how it looks," he said. "I'm interested in what you've built with me. They should see that." She believed him, mostly, but it wasn't Leon she worried about. It was everyone else. The last time she'd been at a gala with a man in a tailored suit, she'd been a silent accessory. She wasn't sure she knew how to move through this world as anything else yet. That night, at home in her small but sunlit apartment in Jamaica Plain, she opened her closet and stared at the row of dresses. Most were practical, work-appropriate, neutral. There was one she'd bought on a whim and never worn, deep green with a low back and a soft drape. It made her feel like a person she hadn't met yet. She tried it on, looked in the mirror. Not bad, she thought, not bad at all. Her phone buzzed. A group chat with friends from her old job lit up with memes and weekend plans. She typed a quick reply about her fancy work thing and dropped in a joking selfie of the dress from the neck down. Emojis flooded in. Her closest friend, Tasha, added, "Girl, if your ex could see you now." Maya stared at that for a moment too long. She hadn't stalked Daniel in months, maybe a year. She'd muted his name on social media. But curiosity had sharp edges, and sometimes, late at night, she still tripped. She opened a private browser window, typed his name. There he was, Daniel Brooks, Senior Partner, Halbridge and Shaw Capital. The firm's bio photo showed him in yet another expensive suit, smile more practiced now. The article below the bio was a profile. From small town to big deals, the relentless rise of Daniel Brooks. Relentless, she thought. That tracked. Scrolling, she found it. A photo from an awards dinner 2 months ago. Daniel stood with his arm around a woman in a cobalt dress, her black hair in a sleek bob. The caption read, Daniel Brooks and fiancée Dr. Evelyn Park at the Halbridge Annual Awards. Fiancée. Maya's lungs did something odd. Not quite a gasp, not quite a sigh. She clicked. Another article, this one about power couples in Boston innovation, mentioned Evelyn. Evelyn Park, PhD candidate in robotics at MIT, whose work at the intersection of AI and human collaboration is already turning heads. MIT. It stabbed at a familiar bruise. The years of being told that without certain letters on her resume she would always be second tier. She zoomed in on Evelyn's face. The woman looked kind, sharp but kind. Not at all the villain that a more convenient narrative would require. Maya closed the laptop. Good for her, she said aloud, as if saying it could make it true. She did not want him. She hadn't wanted him in a very long time. But the thought of him, arm around someone with an MIT pedigree, using words like doctor and fiancé like accessories, it scraped against memories of arguments where he'd told her she was lucky he'd married her given his ambition. She took a deep breath. So what? She muttered. I built something too. She glanced at her reflection again. The woman in the green dress looked back, steady-eyed. If he's there, she thought. You owe him nothing. Still, when the Rolls-Royce pulled up outside her building a week later, she hesitated before getting in. The driver opened the door with a small nod. Ms. Alvarez. It still felt strange that Ms. instead of Mrs. Brooks. In the back seat, Leon looked up from his phone. Wow, he said simply. She smoothed her dress. Too much? Exactly enough, he said. Ready? As I'll ever be, she replied. As the car glided through the city, past the neighborhoods she knew and the ones she'd only started visiting after her life had recalibrated, she watched her reflection in the tinted glass. She didn't know that on another rooftop her ex-husband was about to say, she actually turned down Stanford. When the room went quiet at the sight of her arrival, she only knew that the ache in her chest felt old and new all at once. Conversation at the Seaport Future Impact Gala had a particular pitch, a low hum of deals being hinted at and favors being banked. Near the bar, someone laughed too loudly at a joke about SPACs. On the terrace, a woman in a shimmering dress said disruption twice in one sentence. Waiters circulated with trays of canapes that vanished before they could learn what they were. Daniel thrived in this environment. It was a game he'd finally learned the rules to. Of course, we're also looking at green infrastructure, he was saying to a man from a rival firm. I've got my eye on a few under-the-radar teams. Smart, the man said. And with your fiancé's background, you've got the technical lens covered too. Daniel squeezed Evelyn's shoulder. Couldn't do it without her. She smiled politely, but there was a faint stiffness to it now. He'd missed the moment it had appeared. Then the room's attention shifted. Heads turned toward the glass wall facing the private entrance downstairs. Conversation stalled mid-buzzword. What's going on? Evelyn asked. Daniel followed their line of sight. He saw the car first. A black Rolls-Royce Ghost, its chrome trim catching the city lights. It moved with the kind of quiet authority that screamed money even through soundproof glass. Is that Hartman's? someone near them murmured. Has to be, another replied. Who else rolls up like that? Hartman. Daniel's pulse quickened. He'd been trying to get a meeting with the elusive billionaire for months. A Hartman co-investment was like a golden seal of approval. He barely registered the driver stepping out. His eyes were on the rear door as it opened. A woman's foot in a simple black heel touched the pavement. Then she emerged, the green dress falling around her like liquid. He saw the curve of her jaw first, the familiar slope of her neck. Memory crashed into him like a wave. Impossible, he thought. But there she was. Maya. The same. And not. Her hair was swept up, exposing the clean line of her collarbone. The last time he'd seen her in anything other than work clothes, they'd been at a wedding where she'd sat quietly while he talked shop. Now she moved with a different center of gravity, as though she'd finally realized she wasn't orbiting anyone else. The driver offered his hand. She took it with a small nod, then turned as another figure stepped out behind her. Leon Hartman. He was taller than in photographs, his presence somehow denser. He didn't put a hand on Maya's back or do any of the casual, proprietorial gestures Daniel was used to seeing men like that perform. He simply fell into step beside her. The two of them crossed the entrance like a slow-motion storm. "Is that—" Evelyn started. "That's Hartman," someone answered before Daniel could. "And who is she?" a woman whispered. "No idea," another replied. "But she arrived in his car, so—" The implication hung in the air like perfume. Daniel's throat went dry. He watched as the elevator doors on the far side of the room slid open, depositing Maya and Hartman into the gala's glow. Maya paused for a second, taking in the room. Her gaze swept past clusters of donors, tech founders and policy wonks. She seemed unhurried, unafraid. Then her eyes met his. The world shrank to the distance between them. For a split second, he saw the woman he'd last encountered in a beige room with buzzing lights and a manila envelope in her hands. Hurt, tired, trying not to show either. Then the moment was gone, her expression smoothed into something unreadable, polite, professional. She looked away first, turned to say something to Hartman, who nodded and headed toward a knot of board members near the stage. Maya started toward the bar. Alone. The crowd parted for her, curiosity prickling in her wake. "Do you know her?" Evelyn asked quietly. Daniel's mouth felt stiff. "That's my ex-wife." Evelyn blinked. "The Maya?" "Yes," he said. "How is she with Hartman?" "I don't know." The words tasted like acid. He watched as a small group intercepted her, organizers, from the way they beamed. Hands were shaken, air kisses exchanged. A woman in a blazer touched Maya's elbow with the easy familiarity reserved for peers, not guests. Daniel forced his shoulders back. "So," he said brightly, addressing no one in particular, "I guess Hartman's here. Good to know." No one responded. They were still watching Maya. He gripped his champagne flute so hard his knuckles whitened. Maya felt the weight of eyes on her like warm pressure on her skin. She'd expected attention because of the car, because of Hartman. She had not expected the precise, familiar sensation of being watched by Daniel. She'd spotted him the moment she stepped off the elevator. He hadn't changed much. A little more polish, a little less boyishness. The same slightly too pleased smile he put on when he felt scrutinized. Seeing him was like opening a door to a room she'd locked years ago and finding the furniture rearranged, but the smell unchanged. "Ms. Alvarez," she turned as the event organizer approached, breathless. "We're so honored you and Mr. Hartman could come." "Thank you for having us," Maya said, glad her voice came out steady. "We'd love to have you say a few words later about Hartman Impact Labs," the woman continued. "Your work is exactly the kind of innovation we want to spotlight." "Happy to," Maya said before she could overthink it. As the organizer bustled away, Maya headed to the bar, grateful for the anchor of vanilla-scented wood and glass. "Sparkling water with lime, please," she told the bartender, coming right up. She was aware of Daniel moving closer long before he spoke. Some muscles remembered habits faster than the mind. "Maya," he said, voice pitched casually. "Wow, long time." She turned, schooling her features into something neutral. "Daniel?" she replied. "It has been a while." Up close, she saw the details, the faint lines at the corners of his mouth, the slight shadow beneath his eyes. He smelled like expensive cologne layered over something more familiar, a trace of the soap he'd always used. "You look different," he said, and she couldn't tell if he meant it as compliment or accusation. "People change," she said. "It's been 3 years." "Yeah," he cleared his throat. "I hear you're working with Hartman now." "Co-founding a new initiative with him," she said. "Hartman Impact Labs," he blinked. "Co-founding?" "Yes." She accepted her drink from the bartender. "We invest in community-driven tech." "That's big," he said. "It's work," she replied, unwilling to give him more than that. He laughed a little too loudly. "Come on, Maya. You always undersell yourself. It's your thing." She felt the old dynamic tug like a rip current. "I've been working on that," she said lightly. He opened his mouth, closed it again. His gaze flicked over her shoulder. "I should introduce you," he said. "This is Evelyn, my fiancée." Maya turned. Up close, Evelyn looked younger than she'd seemed in photos, but there was a steadiness in her eyes. She smiled, genuinely. "It's really nice to meet you," Evelyn said, offering her hand. "You too," Maya replied, taking it. Her grip was firm, calm. "Congratulations." "Thank you." Evelyn glanced between them, reading more in the air than Daniel probably realized. "I've heard a lot about you." "Hopefully some of it was accurate," Maya said. Evelyn's lips quirked. "Depends on the day." Daniel coughed. "Evelyn is finishing her PhD at MIT," he added out of reflex. Maya nodded. "I saw that. Impressive." "It's just school," Evelyn said, shrugging. "Useful sometimes, overrated others." Daniel shot her a quick side-eye, as if they'd rehearsed a different line. "MIT is never overrated," he said. Maya felt the old sting, then let it pass. "MIT is a name," she said calmly. "What you do with it is what matters." Evelyn studied her. "Leon speaks very highly of you," she said. "I read the case study on your clinic pilot. It's incredible work." "Thank you," Maya said, caught off guard. "You know Hartman?" Daniel asked Evelyn, surprise flaring. "We've crossed paths," Evelyn said. "He guest lectured at one of our seminars. Actually mentioned Hartman Impact Labs as an example of not useless rich people philanthropy. His words, not mine." Maya laughed, despite herself. "That sounds like him." Daniel's jaw clenched almost imperceptibly. "Well, that's great," he said briskly. "We're all in the same ecosystem now." "Looks that way," Maya agreed. He shifted, trying to regain control of the narrative. "We've been working on some new funds," he told Evelyn, though his eyes stayed on Maya. "I was just telling Greg about how your MIT research gives us a competitive edge, the technical credibility, you know." Maya heard the subtext as clearly as if he'd said it outright. "See? I upgraded." She took a sip of her water. "Daniel always did like having something impressive to point to," she said mildly, even when he'd done most of the real work himself. It took him a second to realize that was, in its own twisted way, a compliment. "Thank you," he said. Evelyn looked between them again, a small furrow in her brow. "So," Maya added, "how have you been?" The question was simple, but for once he didn't seem to have a rehearsed answer. "Busy," he said. "A lot of pressure at the firm. Deals, clients. You know how it is." "I do," she said. "We just measure different outcomes." "Right," he said. "Impact." He said the word like a foreign currency. A silence stretched. It wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't as jagged as she'd imagined either. "Excuse me, Ms. Alvarez?" A young man in an ill-fitting tux hovered nearby, clutching a notebook. "I'm so sorry to interrupt. Our director was wondering if you'd be willing to say a few words on stage after Mr. Hartman, about your work." Maya blinked. "On stage? Yes. We're all huge fans of what you're doing with the labs." He flushed. "I hope one day to, well, anyway, it would mean a lot." Maya felt both Daniel and Evelyn's eyes on her. "Sure," she heard herself say. "I can do that." "Great." The young man beamed and retreated. Daniel let out a low whistle. "Look at you, sharing a stage with Hartman." "It's just a few minutes," she said. "That's more than most people get," he replied. Evelyn touched his arm lightly. "We should probably find our table," she said. "They're going to start the program soon." "Right," Daniel said. He hesitated. "Maybe we can catch up later." "I'll be around," Maya said, which was not a yes and not a no. As they walked away, Evelyn glanced back once, meeting Maya's eyes with a look that was hard to categorize. Curiosity, certainly. Maybe something like respect. Maya turned back to the bar, exhaled slowly, and thought, so that's done. But it wasn't. Not yet. At their table, Evelyn stirred her drink slowly, watching the ice rotate. "You okay?" Daniel asked, unfolding his napkin. "Yeah," she said. "Just processing." "About Maya?" "She's not what I expected," Evelyn admitted. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone who'd be intimidated by all this?" She waved vaguely at the glittering room. "You made it sound like she never really got your world." He shrugged. "She didn't. Back then." "She seems to get it fine now," Evelyn said. "Maybe more than we do." "That's because she got lucky," he said quickly. "Hartman probably needed someone to make him look good. People like Maya are—" He stopped, realizing too late what he was about to say. "People like Maya are what?" Evelyn asked softly. He forced a laugh. "You know, scrappy. From the right background for those bootstrap stories the press loves." "She didn't look like a prop," Evelyn said. "She looked like a partner." Silence settled over them, broken only by the clink of cutlery around the table. "Why did you never tell me she worked in data?" Evelyn asked. Daniel shifted. "It wasn't important." "It sounds pretty important to Hartman," she said. He took a gulp of wine. "Can we not do this here?" "Do what?" "Pick apart my past," he said. "I'm not picking," she replied. "I'm just recalibrating the story you told me." The story he'd told her early on had gone like this. "I married young. It was a mistake." She didn't understand ambition. He'd left out the parts about double shifts, about edited essays, about a woman at a bus stop who kept going even when the taxis didn't stop. On stage, the MC tapped the microphone. The room dimmed slightly as the program began. "Tonight, we're honored to have two very special guests," the MC said. "First, a man whose name is synonymous with innovation and philanthropy, Mr. Leon Hartman." Polite applause rose as Leon walked up, giving a brief, funny, surprisingly blunt speech about the pitfalls of performative giving. "And following him," the MC continued, "we're delighted to hear from someone at the heart of Hartman Impact Labs. Please welcome Maya Alvarez." Evelyn leaned forward slightly. Daniel's jaw tightened. Maya stepped to the podium, notes in hand, then set them down without looking. "Good evening," she began. "I'm supposed to tell you about what Hartman Impact Labs does. We invest in community-driven tech solutions. That's the short version. But what I really want to talk about is power." A murmur rippled. This was not the usual script. "Most of us in this room," she continued, "are here because we hold some form of power. Money, credentials, connections. We like to think we're using those things for good. Sometimes we are. Sometimes we're just rearranging furniture in a burning house." She wasn't raising her voice, but the room leaned in anyway. "Impact isn't about putting your name on a building," she said. "It's about putting resources in the hands of people who know what their own communities need. It's about stepping back and being uncomfortable with how little you actually know about lives that don't look like yours." Evelyn felt a chill run up her spine. Maya talked for just under 5 minutes. She wove in data about clinic outcomes, stories of neighborhood advocates, and a quiet, pointed critique of foundations that demanded innovation but flinched at funding boring things like infrastructure and salaries. She did not mention her alma mater. She did not mention her title until the very end. "I'm Maya Alvarez," she concluded, "co-founder and chief operating officer of Hartman Impact Labs. Thank you for listening." The applause was genuine, warm. People stood. Evelyn clapped too, her palms stinging slightly. Beside her, Daniel's hands came together slower, as if he were forcing them. "She's good," Evelyn said quietly. "She's fine," Daniel muttered. "Fine?" Evelyn turned to him. "She just articulated more clarity in 5 minutes than half the panels I've been on." "You're biased," he said. "You're in that world too." "Our worlds overlap more than you like to admit," she said. Later, when they circulated again, Evelyn found herself drawn into a conversation with a woman from a research institute. Daniel drifted away to shake hands with a partner from another firm. As the night wore on, Evelyn discovered 2 things. First, several people were more interested in talking about Maya's work than about Daniel's new fund. Second, when Daniel did talk about his fiancée, he kept saying MIT like an incantation. "She's at MIT," he'd say, even when no one had asked. "Her PhD in robotics is a huge asset." Eventually, one older man raised an eyebrow and said, "Yes, Daniel, we've heard, several times." Evelyn flushed, though the comment hadn't been directed at her. In the ladies' room, as she washed her hands, she caught Maya's eye in the mirror. "Hey," Evelyn said. "Your speech was... honestly, it was incredible." "Thank you," Maya replied, drying her hands. "I'm sorry if this is weird," Evelyn added. "Meeting like this. I didn't know." "That he had a life before you?" Maya asked, not unkindly. "I knew," Evelyn said. "I just realized tonight that I only knew one version of it." Maya regarded her for a moment. "Listen," Evelyn said, words spilling faster now. "If he's been unfair to you in how he talks about all this, I'm sorry. I know that's not my apology to give, but—" "You don't owe me anything," Maya said gently. "He does." "Do you regret it?" Evelyn asked. "Marrying him?" Maya thought of a Red Line train, a kitchen full of unpaid bills, essays written at 3 a.m., a mediation room, a bus stop in the rain, a Rolls-Royce. "I regret staying longer than I should have," she said. "But I don't regret leaving, and I don't regret who I am because of it." Evelyn nodded slowly. "Do you—" She hesitated. "Do you think he's capable of changing?" "That's a question for you," Maya said. "Not me." Evelyn swallowed. "Right." Maya tossed the paper towel, missing the bin slightly. She picked it up, corrected it, then turned back. "For what it's worth," she said, "you seem like someone who can define her own worth without anyone else's name attached. Don't forget that." Evelyn's eyes burned unexpectedly. "I try," she said. "Good." They walked out together. In the main room, Daniel watched them approach, his expression caught between pride and panic. The gala thinned out after midnight. Donors peeled off to private after-parties. Staff began stacking chairs. Maya stepped out onto the quieter balcony for a breath of air. The harbour wind was cold enough to raise goosebumps along her arms. She relished it. "You always did need to escape the room," a voice said behind her. She turned. Daniel stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets. "Old habits die hard," she said. "Do you remember that fundraiser in Back Bay?" he asked. You disappeared halfway through. I found you on the fire escape. I remember, she said. You told me hiding made you look bad. He winced. I said that? You did. He stepped closer, but not too close. You were great tonight, he said. The speech, the way people listened to you. Thank you. You really built something, he admitted. The words dragged out. So did you, she said. Different things. Yeah, he said. Different. Silence stretched between them again, but this time it was less barbed. I didn't expect to see you here, he said. Same, she replied. I didn't know you were with Hartman like that. Like what? You know, he said vaguely. Arriving in his car, taking meetings with his board. He doesn't do that with many people. He does it with colleagues, she said, and friends. Is that all you are? He asked, something dangerous threading through his tone. Colleagues. She met his eyes. What are you implying, Daniel? He looked away. Nothing, just people talk. And you believe them? She asked. I don't know what to believe, he said, frustration rising. You come in here in a Rolls-Royce making speeches about power. It's just a lot. It's a lot, she agreed, especially if you're used to me coming in on the tee and standing quietly behind you. He grimaced. I was an ass back then. Yes, she said. You were. He nodded, accepting that. You know, he said slowly, sometimes I think about what would have happened if we'd met later, after I got my act together, after I figured myself out more. You think timing was the only problem? She asked. I was scared, he said. Okay, is that what you want to hear? I grew up watching guys like me get chewed up and spat out because they didn't know the right people or have the right degrees. When I finally got in the room, I was terrified they'd realize I didn't belong. And you reminded me of where I came from. She flinched. I reminded you of your mother working 2 jobs? Of your father's broken back from the factory? That's what you told me you wanted to honor. He laughed bitterly. And then I got a taste of being the guy people asked for introductions instead of the guy taking their coats. I liked it. Too much. So I started talking like them, dressing like them, dating. He stopped himself. Dating above your station, she supplied. That's not what You think I don't know what you told people after we split? She asked, voice flat. That you'd traded up? He winced. Maya, I saw the posts, she continued. The pictures with Evelyn, the captions about power couples. I heard from people who overheard you say I never fit in with your world. He opened his mouth, closed it. I was angry, he said finally. I felt like you'd given up on me. I signed the papers you asked for, she said. After you cheated, after you told me I was holding you back. I was wrong, he said. Yes, she replied. You were. Another silence, this one heavy with things that would never be fully untangled. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For what it's worth. She studied him. Do you know what hurt the most? She asked. He shook his head. Not the affair, she said. Not even the divorce. It was realizing that somewhere along the way, you started believing that the people in this room were more real than the girl who held your hand on the red line. His eyes flashed. They weren't more real. They were just useful, she suggested. He sagged slightly. Yes, maybe. You used me too, she said. For stability, for ego, for a story about how you were the ambitious one and I was the anchor. He swallowed. I didn't mean to. I know, she said. That's the problem. He laughed once, harshly. You're different now, sharper. I'm the same, she said. I just stopped translating myself into your language. For a moment he looked like the young man she'd fallen in love with, stripped of all the armor. I really did love you, he said. I don't doubt that, she replied. You just loved yourself more, and you loved who you thought you could be with someone like Evelyn. He flinched. Don't bring her into this. She's already in it, Maya said, whether you acknowledge it or not. He shoved his hands deeper into his pockets. She's different. How? She gets this world, he said. She's from it. Her parents are professors. She speaks their language. And that makes her valuable, Maya said. I hope you see her as more than a credential. He bristled. Of course I do. Do you? He didn't answer. From inside, they heard music swell as the band started a slower song. I'm not here to punish you, Daniel, she said, or to prove anything. I came because it's my job, because I care about the work. Then why did you arrive in a Rolls-Royce? He asked, the bitterness returning. She smiled faintly. Because that's what our driver drives. So you don't. You and Hartman, she raised a brow, are colleagues, friends, co-founders in a venture where he's given me more respect than you ever did. He inhaled sharply. That's not a competition you want to lose, she added. Trust me. He laughed despite himself. No, I guess not. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the harbor lights flicker. I don't know how to fix what I broke, he said quietly. You don't, she said. Not with me. That's not your job anymore. Then what do I do? He asked, almost desperate. You start by being honest, she said. With yourself, with Evelyn. You stop using people as shields against your own fear of not being enough. You get a therapist. A therapist? Yes, Daniel, she said. You unpack why a guy from a small town who made it to big finance still feels like he has to scream MIT in every conversation or he disappears. He opened his mouth to protest, then shut it. And you apologize to the people you've hurt, she finished, without expecting them to absolve you. He nodded slowly. I can do the last part. I can try. Good, she said. They went back inside. Later, in the parking garage, their paths crossed one more time. Maya stood near the elevator, scrolling through emails when she heard raised voices echoing off the concrete. Not about her degree, Evelyn was saying, anger sharpening her words. It's about how you talk about it. About me. You're overreacting, Daniel said. Am I? Evelyn snapped. Do you know how many times tonight you introduced me as my fiancée from MIT instead of just Evelyn? Do you know how small that makes me feel? You're the one who always talks about your work, he shot back. I talk about my work, she said. You talk about my resume, and you talk about Maya like she was some charity project you outgrew. That's not fair, he protested. Isn't it? She asked. Because from where I'm standing, it seems like you only know how to measure people by how they make you look in rooms like this. Maya froze, hidden behind a concrete pillar. She didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the acoustics didn't give her a choice. I love you, Daniel said. Isn't that enough? Love without respect isn't love, Evelyn said quietly. It's need. And sometimes it's fear. Silence. I need to think, she continued, about us, about this engagement, about whether I'm with you because you value me or because you value what my presence says about you. Evelyn, come on. I'm getting a ride with my lab mates, she said. I'll text you tomorrow. Footsteps receded. Maya stepped back, giving her a clear path to the exit. Their eyes met briefly. Evelyn's were bright but steady. Hey, Maya said softly. Hey, Evelyn replied. You okay? I will be, Evelyn said. Eventually, Maya nodded. Good. She didn't offer advice. She didn't say I told you so. She simply let the younger woman walk past with her head held higher than before. A moment later, she heard Daniel's footsteps approaching. You heard that, he said, not quite a question. The acoustics here are terrible for privacy, she said. He laughed once, bitterly. Of course. I meant what I said, she added. What you do next is on you. He nodded, looking suddenly tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. "They're bringing the car around, Ms. Alvarez," the driver called. She turned toward the ramp. The Rolls-Royce glided into view, its headlights washing the concrete in pale light. As she walked toward it, she felt Daniel's gaze on her back. She didn't turn around. The driver opened the door. She slid into the leather seat, the city's night pressing against the windows. "What did you think of the event?" Leon asked, closing his laptop. "Loud," she said. "Complicated." "Complicated how?" "Old ghosts," she said. "New mirrors." He studied her face. "Are you okay?" She exhaled slowly. "Yeah, I think I really am." The car pulled away, leaving the garage and the echoes of old patterns behind. In the weeks that followed, the gala became a story people told. They talked about Hartman's brutally honest speech. They talked about the way he'd ceded the spotlight to his COO. They talked about the mysterious woman in the green dress who'd arrived in a Rolls-Royce and out-argued 3 panelists in 5 minutes. They did not talk, at least not widely, about a conversation in a parking garage or an engagement suddenly on pause. Those stories unfolded in quieter spaces. Evelyn spent long nights in the robotics lab, her hands moving automatically as her mind replayed the evening. How her stomach had twisted every time Daniel said MIT like a trophy. How it had felt to hear Maya speak about power and realize that for all her degrees, she still sometimes handed her power away. 2 weeks after the gala, she sent Daniel a long email. She wrote about boundaries, about respect, about how she wanted a partner who saw her as a person first, not a credential. She wrote about therapy, not as a punishment, but as a possible path. She did not set a date for their wedding. She did not end the relationship outright. She asked for space while he figured out whether he was ready to be the kind of man who could be proud of her without needing to be reflected in her. Daniel read the email 3 times. Then he made a call he'd never expected to make. He found a therapist. The first session was excruciating. He sat on a beige couch, not unlike the one in the mediation room years ago, and tried to explain himself to a stranger who didn't care about his title. They talked about his father's silence after losing his job, about the way kids in high school had sneered when they saw his address, about the first time he'd realized people treated him differently when he mentioned the name of his firm. Slowly, he saw patterns where he'd previously seen only personality. He apologized to Maya again, in writing this time, a letter she read at her kitchen table, the evening sun slanting across the page. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The apology wasn't for her to manage. Instead, she put the letter in a drawer and went back to reviewing a proposal from a group of high school students in Dorchester who wanted to build a mental health app for their peers. "Too risky?" one of her analysts asked. "They're so young." "That's exactly why we should meet with them," she said. "Get them the support they need to make mistakes safely." She thought of her younger self, navigating big decisions without guides. Redemption, she'd come to realize, wasn't a cinematic moment. It was a series of choices, small and unglamorous, repeated until they rewrote a life. For her, redemption looked like using the power she'd accidentally gathered, titles, proximity to wealth, invitations to rooms she'd once only glimpsed, to open doors sideways for people who didn't speak the right language. She still rode the bus sometimes. The Rolls-Royce was for certain events, not for everyday life. One rainy evening, waiting under a shelter, she saw a young woman clutching a folder, eyes red from crying. "First grant rejection?" Maya asked gently. The woman sniffed. "Third, actually." Maya smiled faintly. "You're ahead of where I was at your age." She listened. She offered advice. She wrote down her email. She said, "It's not about making yourself smaller to fit their boxes. It's about finding the funders who understand what you're trying to build." She did not mention Rolls-Royces or billionaires. At Hartman Impact Labs, she pushed for transparency and community oversight of their investments. She argued with Leon about board seats and veto power. He listened, sometimes grudgingly, then admitted she was right more often than he liked to admit. "Remind me never to underestimate a woman from a bus stop," he said one day. "Remind me never to underestimate a billionaire who actually listens," she replied. Their relationship remained stubbornly unromantic, to some observers' disappointment. They were partners, in the truest sense, aligned in mission, willing to challenge each other, uninterested in adding a subplot that could derail the work. As for Daniel and Evelyn, their story didn't resolve neatly. They didn't elope or implode. They talked, they argued, they cried. Sometimes they laughed again. At one point, Evelyn suggested they attend a Hartman Impact Labs public forum. "Why?" Daniel asked. "Because we both have a lot to learn about power," she said, and she caught herself before saying Maya. "They're asking the right questions." He almost said no. Pride flared, then fizzled. "Okay," he said. They sat in a community center folding chair, listening to residents challenge the labs team. Maya facilitated, her voice calm, her posture open. Evelyn asked a question about algorithmic bias. Maya answered like she would with any other attendee, clearly, respectfully, with enough technical depth to satisfy. Afterward, they exchanged a brief nod. No more, no less. They didn't become friends. They didn't need to. But something in Daniel's understanding of his own story shifted. He stopped telling the version where he'd traded up. He started saying, when asked about his past, "I hurt someone who didn't deserve it because I was scared of being small. I'm trying to be better now." Sometimes people looked uncomfortable. Sometimes they leaned in. He learned to live with both. Maya learned to inhabit her own life without checking it against his shadow. One afternoon, she received an email from Tasha. "Saw this article. You're becoming a LinkedIn celebrity. Don't forget us when you're running the world." The article was a profile, From Bus Stops to Boardrooms, How Maya Alvarez is Rewriting the Rules of Impact Investing. She snorted at the title, but as she read, she realized that the parts that mattered weren't the glossy phrases. It was the quotes from clinic staff, from neighborhood organizers, from those high school students in Dorchester whose app was now in beta. They were the real story. She was just a conduit. That night, on a different rooftop, at a smaller gathering, this one organized by a local coalition, not a foundation, someone introduced her as Maya, who helped us get the funding for our clinic expansion. No titles, no cars, no billionaire's name attached. It was the introduction that meant the most. She stood there, the city's lights spread out below, and thought of the woman stepping out of a Rolls-Royce while her ex-husband watched. It had felt like a victory then. Now she understood. The real victory was walking into any room, in any clothes, from any mode of transportation, and knowing exactly who she was, without needing anyone else's astonished gaze to confirm it. And that's where we'll leave them. Maya, no longer the girl on the red line, but a woman who built her own seat at the table. Daniel, finally forced to confront the cracks beneath his polished surface. And Evelyn, wise enough to question a love that treated her like a resume. Sometimes karma doesn't arrive with fireworks. It pulls up quietly in a black Rolls-Royce, opens the door, and invites you to decide who you're going to be from now on. If this story made you feel something, anger, satisfaction, maybe even a little uncomfortable recognition, don't keep it to yourself. Hit like if you believe worth is more than a school name. Drop a comment telling me which moment hit you hardest. And if you want more real feeling stories about love, power, and second chances, make sure you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching and for staying to the very end.